Welcome to Earth, a love story. I'm your host, Robin Lassiter. Over the past 15 weeks or so, I've read my entire unedited manuscript to you. If you're new here, you can go back to the very first episode, start with the preface, and listen to the whole book, also titled Earth, a Love Story, which will be out in print this summer. Now we're transitioning the podcast to conversations, and I'm so excited today to bring you the first of what I'm calling the Experiencer episodes. In this episode, we meet Victor, a lifelong experiencer of contact with non-human entities, ghosts, the dead, and more. Victor details events around high strangeness, his 2 near-death experiences, close contact with a craft and non-human intelligence, and his close and unique relationship with death itself. Victor's account of his life as an experiencer is truly one of the most amazing I've ever heard. I'm so grateful that he has chosen to share his story in this depth and for the very first time with us. It was an honor to be with him for this telling.
Growing up, I had this stereotypical haunted house aspect of my life. I grew up in a house that was built by my next door neighbor, who was a 98-year-old man. My mother took good care of him. Him and his brother built the 2 houses. So they were, 80 years old when I moved into them, and had a whole family that had lived and died in it before I moved in. And we had the stereotypical haunting, doors opening by themselves, cupboards opening by themselves, objects going missing. We had a very steep staircase with very tall stairs. It was kind of difficult to walk up and down the staircase, but and very noticeable when someone did. When I was a child, I had everyone's footsteps memorized, whose mom's coming up the stairs, dad's coming up the stairs. Well, sometimes in the middle of the night, someone else would come up the stairs, and I don't know who they were. We'd get up and I'd open up the door and look at the top of the staircase, and no one's there. And so, the paranormal aspects kind of have always been around me. I've always felt like predisposition to experience them. There's just, I think my first true encounter with a ghost, I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and I woke up right after going to sleep. I'd been tucked in. I'm trying to get to bed, and I just about to close my eyes, and I hear something next to my bed. And I had a little tiny bookshelf with all of my books on it because I was an avid reader as a child. My mom took me to the library 2 to 3 times a week. I had a little bookshelf, and there's this little girl, and she's transparent, like blue, and she's picking up my books and she's reading them. And I can remember not really being afraid at first. I was just more like, what are you doing? Those are my books. So I sat up and said, hey, those are my books. What are you doing? Where did you come from? And the second I said that, she looked at me and the book went through her hands, and she turned and went through the door. And at that point, I was even thinking about it now, I get that dopamine shiver, and, pull the blankets over my head, and I'm peeking out just a little bit, just trying to figure out what the heck just happened. I wasn't really too sure if that was a real thing or if it was just me being a child and experiencing some kind of fantasy until I was a lot older in my teens, and my friend needed a place to stay with us. So he came and lived with us for a couple weeks while his parents were moving. He slept in the back bedroom. And one night he said, I couldn't sleep. So I got up and I went to the bathroom. And as I was going to the bathroom, the door to the bathroom's wide open and the staircase is right there. He said, I looked out the door and there was a little girl standing at the top of the staircase looking at me. What am I doing in the bathroom? What am I doing here? And that was the kind of first confirmation that what I was experiencing wasn't just my vivid imagination. I had other things I was in the back room playing. I had a playroom, and I was inside of a sleeping bag. And I crawled inside the sleeping bag, and I got all cozy. And then I went to go find the exit for the sleeping bag, and it was as if someone was standing on it, trapping me inside the sleeping bag. So that was a little scary. And there were times where it was frightening, but I was never really like crippled by it. It never really bothered me too much, because I think it just happened so often. And like, it got to the point where we were just about to move out of the house and things started to get really active. And I honestly believe it was because they didn't want me to leave. Having someone around that could see them, that would talk to them, that would interact with them, like, even if it was yelling at them for opening up the front door the 5th time while I'm watching Dragon Ball Z on the couch, I have to get up and shut the door again. I think even little things like that, like, there was this weird connection between me and whatever else was there on the land. And when we were just about to move out, we had an experience where all of the light bulbs on the 2nd floor blew up at the same time when we were packing things up in my bedroom. And we called an electrician and had him come in, and they're like, there's no way that this could happen. That's really weird. We got to check your electricity. And nothing was really wrong. It just happened. And then in the middle of the night, I think probably a couple nights before my surgery, I remember my mom telling me this. She said that I walked into her bedroom in the middle of the night and she said, you sounded like a little girl when you were talking to me. And at this point, I'm like, 17. I'm a 17-year-old boy. And she said, and you cried in my arms and you told me, I don't want you to leave. Like, don't go. Like, please just stay. And you did that for like an hour before I finally put you to bed. And I don't remember doing that. Like, it's obviously something that just like kind of happened. So like, definitely been connected with spirits or whatever you want to call them. I don't know if they're spirits or if they're like an alternate timeline that I'm interacting with, or I just feel like something about the way that my brain works lets me see them, lets me hear them, lets me experience them. But it wasn't just like ghosts when I was a kid. It was definitely the other aspect, the lights in the sky. My first sighting was probably at 5 or 6 years old, and in the same house. I woke up in the middle of the night and I had a doorway into the back room that overlooked the backyard. It had a big window, and there was a garden in our backyard. We had a 1/4 acre backyard with a beautiful garden, vegetables, flowers. My dad spent 3 days tilling up the backyard, and we planted a big ass garden. It was beautiful. I love it. It was my favorite thing as a child. And so I woke up in the middle of the night, and outside of the window, there was bright light coming in. And so I got up and I walked into the back room and I pushed the curtains back, and I'm just barely tall enough to like look out the window. I'm at the window ledge, and I'm able to look up really easily. And above the trees, there's this really bright glowing light, like just insanely bright. Like it's like a helicopter lighting up the whole entire backyard, but there's no noise. There's nothing. It's very soft, quiet. And I realized like as this light's coming down, I'm like, I gotta go see this. Even as a child, this was like, the curiosity overwhelms me. I have to know. And there's probably something to that. So I had to know. And I walked down the staircase, and I can remember getting to a point where it's like, there's no turning back. And I've experienced this twice now where like, I know that like I've made a choice to go have an experience. And there's something inside of me telling me like, this is the line. You can either keep going or you can turn around and go back to bed. And I chose to keep going. So I took the stick out of the door and I opened up the sliding door and I went to the backyard. And there's this object at the corner of the 1/4 acres of the lot. And I don't know if I can't really describe the shape just because there's light coming off of it. There's this little guy out there, I don't know how to describe it, but there's this little guy out there, and we had a conversation. Me as a child had a conversation. I don't really remember what it was about. I feel like there was like some kind of like exchange, some kind of deal made, or some kind of like plan set in motion at this point. And I really don't remember what it was about, but the next day I can remember having an experience my mom was next door helping out the old man. We called him Grandpa Henry. And I'm in the garden and something happens to me. And I have a bump on my arm. And I tell my mom a bug bit me. So my mom thinks I was stung by a bee. They put cream on my, like baking soda cream on my bump to see if it's a stinger and it's going to work its way out. No big deal. Well, nothing ever comes out. In fact, there's no entry wound. I just all of a sudden have this inflammation on my right here, I'm above my elbow, and I still have it. What I know now is the bug wasn't a bug. The bug was a person. The bug was something that looked like a bug, and I got tagged. I got an implant. Not only did I get one implant, but I got 2 implants. I had one on my back, and that one kind of turned into be a little bit of a problem. But ever since then, I could feel that light out there. I could feel when they were coming. I could feel when I was going to have an experience. So probably like a couple years later, standing in the driveway with my neighbor, Michael, and we're throwing pop rocks at each other. It just had been 4th of July, and we're throwing little pop rocks at each other in the driveway. And it's just about to go sundown. It's probably like, 7:30. It's like summertime, and we're just playing, just about to go home and have dinner. And just as, we're just finishing up and we're picking up the pop rocks. And then all of a sudden Michael says, "Look, what's that?" And points to the sky. And I look up, and there are these 3 orange orbs flying in close, real low and slow. And they get right above the driveway and they stop over top of us. And it's kind of like, it's just like big, beautiful orange amber orbs, and like kind of like that haze effect, like a mirage heat effect. And it stays there like that for, I'm not sure how long, a couple of minutes, long enough for us to see it and go, "Oh, wow, I can't believe that." And then it flies off. And we run in the house and we tell his dad, who was a Marine, "Oh, we just saw a UFO, we just saw a UFO." And he goes, no, it was probably the B-2 flying over. It was probably this, it was probably that, trying to tell us that we hadn't seen what we saw. But I knew that's what that was. Like, I knew for a fact. And so that just kind of kept happening. Like, every once in a while I would get that feeling, and I would go outside and I would look up, and there would be either nocturnal lights or I had a daytime sighting once where I was riding my bike about 15 in the park, and I was just riding my bike back and forth, and I happened to look up, and there's this big, looked like a blimp, but it was a cigar-shaped UFO with a black band around one end. And I say that I know it's a UFO because we thought it was a blimp, and I say we because I'm riding in the street looking up at the sky, and a couple of people now are joining me. And so we're all looking up at the sky in the park watching this thing, and we're all kind of guessing what it is. And the guy says, "I think it's a blimp." And I said, "Yeah, I think you're right." And about the time I said that, it reorientates itself from east-west to north-south and takes off south faster than anything I've ever seen. And we were like, well, maybe that's not a blimp, that was weird. So, it's kind of just been a constant occurrence in my life where every couple years, since the time I was about 4 or 5, I have these encounters, and sometimes they get really close, and sometimes it's just seeing the nocturnal light in the sky. And this went on for quite a while growing up into my teenage years. And when I was 17, though, I had to have surgery on my chest because I'm a Marfanoid, which means I have a genetic disorder called Marfan syndrome. And it caused my chest to cave in rather than to grow outwards. So I had a pectoral deformation, and it was causing my heart to displace, my lung was collapsing, and it was killing me. And when they found it, it was already a little bit late for the corrective surgery. So at this point, they were doing the surgery to save my life and hopefully, correct the position of my sternum. I had what was called the Ravitz procedure, and that's where they saw your sternum from tip to tip break all your ribs, shave all the cartilage away from your ribs, reform everything, and then put 2 metal rods in to hold it in place. Surgery took about 3.5 hours. It was the most severe case of pectus excavatum the surgeon had ever seen. It was dire for me to get in and get the surgery done. While I was on the table, chest open, it was kind of weird because they put me under, but it's like a part of me can't be put under. It's like there's a kernel in my brain that stays aware. And I'm not sure if that's me or if that's something else, but I can remember them doing the whole surgery. And it's still one of my like big trigger fears is like when I start reminiscing through that, because like I experienced it pretty much the whole thing. And the weirdest part was they had my chest open and my heart stopped, and it stopped for 1 minute and 43 seconds. And when my heart stopped, I was no longer in my body. It was like there's this field around me that was holding whatever I was then inside of my body. And when that heart stopped, that field weakened and I was no longer in my body. I'm standing behind my surgeon and I'm watching him frantically try to save my life. You know, at this point, bells and whistles are going off. And I'm looking over his shoulder and I'm like, come on, you can do this. You know, I'm trying to like encourage him to do this. And then I get this pulling feeling. And the only way I can describe it is if you've ever been on a roller coaster, that like G-force feeling of going forwards on a roller coaster, imagine that, but backwards. It's like a pull. And I get pulled away from earth and I get pulled away from my body and I get pulled way far away. And all of a sudden I'm completely somewhere else. And there's this big tree, this big, beautiful light tree. It's made of light. And I'm like sitting under it. And there are all these people around me. And they're all like, oh, we've been waiting for you to wake up. You know, like, oh, we've been waiting for you to come back. You know, like, oh, it's nice. It's good to see you. And I'm like, you know, where am I? What's going on? And they're like, oh, no, it's okay. It's all right. Don't freak out, you know? And just about the time I realize I'm somewhere else, I hear the sound of the little paddles that the guy was holding, the surgeon was holding, little tiny paddles on sticks. And I hear that sound and they hit me with one jolt to start my heart up. And when they hit me with that jolt, it was like that pulling feeling in opposite 1,000 times, man. I just immediately pulled back to that spot, back to that room, back to that surgeon. And I'm watching him do it again. And he hits it one more time. And when he hits me, I'm watching him do it at this point. And when he hits me one more time, it's like I'm in two places at once. It's like I'm inside of my body, but I'm also not at the same time. There's like this weird, like dual locality feeling, sense. And he hit me the third time and I was back in my body. But like, I can remember when I woke up, from the surgery, they finished, they got my heart started, they sewed me back up, everything went fine. My mom told me that when I woke up, the first thing that I said to her was, you know, that I had spoken to angels and that they had brought me back. Angels had brought me back. That was I was convinced, like, you know, I was somewhere else and angels brought me back. And I do honestly believe, like, I went somewhere. I wasn't in my body. I went somewhere and like I did get brought back, like somehow. And when I was at the place with the big tree, like they knew that I wasn't going to stay there. They knew that it was just a moment, and they were letting me know, like, hey, it's all right, you're going back, you know, like this is going to happen a couple times, you know, this is something that's gone on. You've done this before, just don't worry about it, you'll come back, you know, like don't worry about it, and we're going to send you back, and you know, we're going to make sure everything's fine, you know, don't worry about it. Like I can remember the one thing about being at that tree with all these other people is that they've known me forever. Like they're like this group of people that have just like I've hung out with. They're like close friends or something. I don't know. Like they all know me by different names, which is a little bit weird. Like I got the distinct impression that I knew each person from a different lifetime, and that's really weird to think about. but I experienced, definitely had that near-death experience without a body, had the whole, went to some place and came back, on the verge of death or whatever it is. But that was the first time that I experienced my near-death experience, and that fundamentally really kind of like changed the way I look about religion and the way I looked about spirituality. Because before I was raised by atheists. My dad was a pretty staunch atheist. My mom wasn't really too religious at all, and so I was raised fairly, agnostic or atheistic. But when I had my near-death experience, it was like, well, that just kind of proves to me that my brain is capable of more than I thought. Than that the human body and consciousness and everything is a lot more in depth than I previously thought. And I just started reading. I read, you start with your typical American, religion. I read the Bible. I read the Quran. I've read everything I could get my hands on that would talk about, the nature of what they believed that happened after you died, or what happened, any like spirituality. I went through the whole New Age subculture of books, and I went through the whole, I got really big into like the Western mystery school religions and the occultism, and so it really sparked something in me, and I think that was the point. Was to make me just consume all of this information and keep it up in my brain, and not only do that, but tell other people about it. And to share that experience and to talk to people about it. I think that kind of was the point, and that kind of changed me. But the weird thing is that was the first time. And, this my second time. I'll save for a little bit later, because I did want to talk about having the implant in my back removed. That was a few years before that, but I was a sleepwalker most of my life as a child, and I think that the implant had something to do with that, because they would make me walk into the yard or at night if I didn't want to. They'd turn that thing on, and I would sleepwalk into the yard, and off we'd go. And I think when I had that removed, it affected the way that contact happened. I went in for outpatient. I was like 16 years old, so a few years before my surgery. I went in for outpatient. They weren't sure what it was, so they wanted to take it out and biopsy it. And they cut open into me, and when they were pulling on that thing, it honestly felt like they were pulling my legs out of my body from that spot. Like my whole entire bottom half, even though I had anesthetic, was on fire. It was the worst thing that I've ever experienced as far as pain. And when they touched that thing, and I had a knowing inside of me that, like, you shouldn't have done that. Like, come on, like we needed that, so they pulled it out, and it was metallic, but it was also surrounded in a goo, like a nasty substance. And they asked me first off if I had ever been shot in the back with a BB gun, because they thought, oh, well, maybe it was a BB or a piece of shrapnel. Have you ever been, your father mows lawns for a living. Were you ever with him and maybe got a piece of metal shrapnel from the lawnmower kicking it out or something? No, it's just weird because it doesn't have an entry wound. How does something that's not natural like this get in your body? Like, how did this happen? And they sent it off to testing, and it came back as, just it's benign. The substance around it was benign. It wasn't a tumor. It was, it's just weird, and it probably went in a bio waste bin, and I never saw it again. So if I knew what I knew then, now I would have asked them, hey, put that in a glass container and let me keep that sucker. But, it didn't happen. But after that, I stopped sleepwalking. I stopped getting the urge to go, just walk around all night. Like, I just would walk. That was walk the city in the middle of the night, go out and walk the streets. But that stopped after that. Like I stopped having that compulsion. I stopped having sleepwalking. I stopped waking up outside. I stopped waking up on the trampoline, or, like little things like that just ended. But I still had that feeling where I could tell when I was about to have an experience. Like I could tell when I was about to see UFOs. That stayed with me. And I think either that's something else, or that has something to do with the implant in my arm, or, who knows? Not really too sure about that yet. But so I had my surgery, had that removed, and I had my near-death experience. And it really shook me up for a while. Like I was pretty anxious ridden about having that happen again, like about having to go through that again. But I felt like I was given the second chance on life at the same time. So I lived really hard. They told me you would be lucky to see 30. I was a 17-year-old kid, just turned 18. So I did what any kid would do, is I lived fast. I lived hard. I left house. I went and joined a punk circus, a backyard punk service where we did fire tricks, and I couch surfed all the way down to Florida and back. And I just went out and I tried to live life. I tried to live life to its fullest. And that was really kind of my plan, was to live hard and die fast, I think. And then I didn't die. So it was like, all right, time to calm down a little bit. But 2010, 2011 is, I think, where it started to pick back up as far as like sightings and close encounter experience for me. I was kind of like in between places. I was in this like weird liminal space where I was staying at my father's up north, and at the same time trying to have a life for myself down in the city that I was living with, trying to get into a big house with a group of friends, be roommates. So I was like trying to pay rent down there and have a job up north, and I'm driving 90 miles back and forth all this time. And so I feel like I was in this like weird in between space. And starting in 2011, I started seeing a lot more nocturnal lights in the sky. And they would get pretty darn close too. They would fly over the top of the house that I was living with at my dad's. And I remember one night I saw it as a satellite. I do a lot of sky watching as a kid. When I was younger, I did a lot of, I knew where all the constellations were. My grandpa taught me all the constellations as a kid. So I did a lot of night watching. I'm outside watching, looking at the stars, and here comes this, what looks like a satellite. It's up in the sky, a really tiny little dim light. And this thing gets closer and closer and closer. And pretty soon it's the size of a small car. And it's this saucer. It looks like a lens. It looks like a lenticular shape. And it's white. And on the bottom, there's a bright yellow light. And it literally flies right over top of me, right over top of the house and the tops of the pine trees, and brushes the tops of the pine trees. So that's how close it was. I mean, this thing is huge. And so I run in the damn house, and I grab my dad, butt naked out of bed, wrapped in a blanket, and we're standing in the doorway looking at this thing, and it just kind of slowly kind of drifts north. And he just goes, "Huh, that's weird." And back in the house he goes. And I'm like, that is so weird. Like the fact that we're not both losing our minds over this, and we're both just like, oh yeah, wow, oh that's weird. So that's kind of how it started. And then it just kind of ramped up from there. It was like every other night it was there, and I kept getting this feeling like something was about to happen at any minute, but it wasn't gonna it wasn't happening. Like I felt like I was at this like precipice at that time, like something big's gonna happen, but it never happened. And so I just kind of like let it go. I just started thinking it was just normal. Maybe they just live here, this is their backyard. I don't have to worry about it. It's not me. It's not anything to do with me. It's not anything to do with me. It can't be. It's just it has to be something to do with something else. It's just got to be their backyard or something. And then in 2011, it started showing up, not just up north, but when I was down in the city I was living with at the time with my friends. I had finally moved in with my roommates, and we had a big old house. It's a 100-year-old house, and we stayed pretty close together. And it was showing up at the house that I was staying with down south with my roommates. And I think part of the reason was is because I kind of asked them to. And I think about that a lot because how it affects other people when they witness UFOs, and like me requesting that they show up. But at that point I was thinking that I was going crazy. I thought maybe if it was just me, I was seeing things. So I wanted proof. I wanted to have proof that I wasn't just the only one experiencing this stuff, And so I asked him one night, and I was at the time was meditating pretty regularly, whether it be like a prayer or meditation to them or whatever it was. I had this communication like, hey, show yourself to me in the presence of others so I know I'm not insane. And the very next day, me and Aaron are sitting on our little second story closed-in porch, and we're having a cigarette. And he goes, hey, what's that? During the middle of the day, points out to the west towards the city. And there's this bright glowing object. During the day, it's bright, it's glowing, and it's daytime out. So it must have been insanely bright. It flies in from the west and stops right next to one of the only large buildings next in downtown. We have a clear view down one of the streets to downtown, and it flies in and stops and hovers there and just sits there for long enough to smoke a cigarette, so probably like 5 or 6 minutes, and then it just goes back the way we came. Oh wow, that was cool, that was really neat. They're real excited. So I'm thinking, okay, cool. I feel less guilted about inviting this into their lives, about showing up there, and he's just like ecstatic. He couldn't believe that we saw a UFO, and it was a big thing. And during this time, we're all we're a music house. We're all a bunch of musicians. So we're partying, our friends definitely experimenting with psychedelics on occasion. And, we're having a good time. We're partying. And we're also at the same time doing like deep meditation exercises with each other, yoga every day, and we're doing psi experiments that, doing the card guessing was a big game in our house. We were just basically training ourselves to be psychics without knowing it. This is the crazy thing about the coinciding experience at home with my experiences with the UFOs is like, while this is all going down, I'm teaching my friends how to be psychic. I'm teaching my friends how to use their psychic abilities this whole time. And I never even put 2 to 2 together until later in life, that I'm fulfilling this role that I don't even know that I'm fulfilling, that I was put on like this to teach, to share that experience. And we did a lot of card guessing games and a lot of remote viewing. I'm going to pick an area and I want you to think about what the area looks like. And, I'm next to a pool of water. No, that's not it. It's really hot. And I'm thinking, well, I'm at a volcano. I picked a volcano in Hawaii. And just so weird things like that. And also, I think the most impressive thing that we did was we got a pinwheel on top of a pin and put it underneath a large glass bowl. And then we would sit there and it would be completely still. And then with our minds, we'd make it spin. We'd make it start spinning. And me and Aaron were both pretty good at this. My roommate, Aaron, we were both pretty good at this. We could make it spin. We could make it stop and go the opposite direction. And we did that for a couple days in a row. And so first sighting, me and Aaron. Second sighting, me and my partner. At the time, she was just my roommate. We're leaving to go through the park. We lived in front of a big park, and on the other side was a little store. We're going to go get some drinks and snacks. And we leave the house, and it's kind of overcast outside. And Hannah, my partner, looks up at the sky, and she goes, oh, look, there's that amber orb you and Aaron saw yesterday. And it's just hovering there. And it's just watching us, right? It's just sitting there waiting for us. And it disappears. And it reappears somewhere else. And then it disappears. And it reappears somewhere else. And at this point, we're standing in the middle of the street just losing our minds. I can't believe this. Hannah's ecstatic, having a good time with it. I can't believe we just saw that. And that was cool. And so a couple days after that, we're all getting ready to go out to a parabolic dune in West Michigan, where I live. It's one of the only parabolic dunes in West Michigan. It's a beautiful, huge dune face, and kids used to go out there to party. So I'm the designated driver. I'm sober. I just want to preface that. I'm the designated driver. I drive us all out there, and we get to the bottom of the big sand hill. It's a giant sand hill. And Aaron just happened to look at me. He goes, I feel weird. I feel like something's going to happen. I was like, yeah, me too. I feel kind of like I got butterflies in my stomach. And he's like, yeah, And so we climbed the giant dune hill, and you get up to the top of this giant dune hill, and you look back east, and you can see all the cities glowing in the distance. And you look west, and you can see Lake Michigan in all its splendor for miles and miles and miles. Beautiful. And about a quarter mile out over the lake, there are 2 gigantic amber orbs just waiting for us. He's sitting there watching. And Aaron looks at me and goes, is that what I think it is? And I go, yeah, dude, that's what you think it is, definitely. And down in the middle of the bowl, so it goes up to the top of the dune face, and that goes down into this big bowl. And in the middle of the bowl, there was a group of people having a fire. And so we're like, oh, we'll just go join them, We went and grabbed some firewood and went down there, and there was already a group of kids down there having a good time. So we figured, oh, well, we friends of friends, we'll hang out together. And we're sitting around this fire, and they're playing on the acoustic, and I'm drawing mandala patterns in the sand, right? And just erasing them, drawing mandala patterns. And finally, I just get sick of it. I said, I got to go see the UFOs. And there's 2 girls with us. And they said, what? I said, well, me and Aaron saw 2 giant UFOs over the lake when we came in, and I want to know if they're still there. I want to go see them. I'm sick of this. There's something more exciting happening, and there's 2 giant UFOs right over that dune face. Okay, we'll go with you. So me and 2 girls I never met before walk up to the sand dune and look down over Lake Michigan, and there they are, just perfectly still, and in tandem. Just as we start to look at them, they start to descend towards the surface of the lake, slowly, very slow, in tandem. And the girls are, oh, wow, and I'm just completely silent at this point because I know something's about to happen. And the first orb on the right goes into the water, drops into the water. And you don't see the splash, but you see it glowing. You see it glowing as it goes deeper and deeper and deeper into Lake Michigan. And there's a spot there that it just drops down in Lake Michigan. It's huge. It's a giant lake. It's like a sea. You can't see the other side when you stand at the shore. And the other one, the one on the left, stays there for a moment. And you can no longer see the one that's under the water. It's deep into the Lake Michigan, going to wherever it needed to go. And the one on the surface starts to kind of shimmer a little bit, and it goes from orange to white. And when it's white, it starts to look like it's spinning or something, because one side's dark and the other side's illuminated, because it starts to look like it's blinking, like a lighthouse light going around in circles or something. And it goes faster and faster, and pretty soon it's going strobing. It's going, and all of a sudden, towards Chicago, south, faster than anything I've ever, just lightning out of a gun, gone. And the girls, ecstatic. I can't explain the energy that comes from people witnessing UFOs. It's like a drug. It's so potent. And they run down the hill yelling, "We've seen it. We've seen it. We saw it. We saw the UFO," trying to tell their friends that they saw this UFO. But those poor girls, they had that experience while on acid. Like, they were there to party. And so I always wondered what that was like for them. Like, what went through their heads, what, and I wish I could find them and talk to them after this, because it would just be so cool to sit down and be like, what was that night like for you? Because I know it wasn't the same for me. Like, I experienced something, but you probably experienced something much more profound. And, that was probably the coolest. And there's something to that lake and to that beach. I've been back to that spot, and there's ilmenite and magnetite sand, black sand that washes up on the beach. And when the second I saw that sand, it was like I knew something. There was a knowing installed into me that was one of the reasons why they were there. They were there to mine ilmenite and magnetite, and it is used in a process that they use it. Somehow they use it, and that's what they were there for. And so I became obsessed with collecting it, because maybe they would want some someday and I could have something to trade or something. I don't know why, but I became obsessed with going to that beach and using a magnetic sieve. I collected up probably about 20 pounds of these. I got 4 mason jars full, and I could still feel it out there. Like, I don't know. A part of me thinks that it was placed out there. Like, it's kind of weird to talk about because I don't have any reason to believe that, but I still feel it out there. Like, I still feel it under that water, sitting at the bottom of the lake, waiting for whatever it's waiting for. And I don't know what it's waiting for. I don't know if it's, a part of me wonders, is it for me? Is that why I'm so connected to it? Because I also have had the dreams since I was a child of flying it, flying the craft, getting on board, seeing it and flying it. So yeah, that was the summer of 2011 where I was seeing all of these close encounters, like where I was having other people witness the UFOs with me. And so that was like, they were like, there you go. You're not crazy. We've shown yourself into the presence of others. Here you go. Then in November of 2011, I think it was November 5th, I was up north. I was visiting with my mother, who's disabled, making sure she had food for the night and that everything was fine, walking the dog for her. And about 9 o'clock, my dad texts me and says, well, you better come home and have some dinner. It's getting late. I said, all right. And I only live about 15 minutes, or my dad only lives about 15 minutes from where my mom was in town. So I'm driving home, and it's nighttime, and it's November, and it's sleeting. It's nasty out. I got a light coat and a pair of Converses on. It's cold. I'm driving my little 98 S10 stick shift truck, and I come up to the overpass that my dad's road, Boone Road, and the overpass over the highway is elevated. And out and to the left, there's a field that's next to the river. They're working on developing at the time, developing the area for what is now a FedEx building. But at the time, there was nothing out there. There was a little tiny road that went over the river, and that was about it, and dirt road. And I see, as I come up to the overpass at night, this light out in the field, brighter than anything I've ever seen in my life. And it's casting shadows all the way across the street from the tree line. It's behind the tree line. It's casting these long shadows. And so I'm going, from 50, I drop it down into third. I'm going from 50 to 25. I stop. Ooh, I want to know what this is. And there was someone behind me. And this is how I know, like it wasn't just me seeing something, because we both slowed down with an open lane for him to pass me. We both kind of were like, this is weird, like we both slowed way down on an old road to figure out what we were seeing. And the only difference was I turned around in the car parking lot that was on the right to turn around and go see what it is. And he kept going, my curiosity. And again, there was that curiosity. Like, I have to know, like, I've got to know, is this what I think it is? I have to know. I just have to. It's a compulsion. I can't not know. And so I stop, and I'm sitting in that driveway for the car parking lot, ready to turn left again so I can go park and go see what it is. I'm thinking, I'm getting all of these thoughts in my head, like, where's my camera? Oh, my camera's back down south, like, oh crap, should I just go home and tell my dad? And like, I'm like debating whether or not I should stay or not. And finally I just decide, you've got to go see this. And so I pull forward and I pull into the driveway for the road that goes over the river, but it's chained off, big chains, big cement blockers. And so that's how I knew, well, it's not a truck that had gotten down there. At first I thought maybe it was an emergency vehicle or something. And then I thought, well, maybe they're deer shiners. It's near hunting season. Maybe they're out there shining deer. Not uncommonly heard of in Podunk, northern Michigan. no, I don't think that's it, because how are they getting back there if this is, all chained up? And I get out of the car and I have this hood, hard plastic raincoat on with a hood, and I'm walking, and I realize that I get to this point, and like I said before, I get to this point where I look back and I can no longer see the truck, and I realize that this is that line again. You could either turn around and go back to the truck and not have this experience, or you can keep going. And I decided that I was going to keep going. And so I rounded the corner and got to the first tree line. And at this point, my heart is beating 1,000 miles a minute. And I'm getting chest tightness. I'm getting, concerned at this point that something's going to happen with my heart, which is always a big, concern of mine ever since I had, the near-death experience and problems with my heart. And I get about 75 feet away from this thing, and I'm crouched down next to a tree line, and I look and I see this big black object. It's about 90 feet in diameter. It's huge, and it's sitting in front of two tall trees, and the rest of the area had been clear cut for development, and all of the trees and wood had been mulched and turned into chips onto the ground. And this thing's floating about 6 feet off the ground, and it's huge, and its both edges are radiating this aura of light, this auroral discharge, and it's arcing. It's not making any noises, but it's arcing. Like, there's no bulbs on the craft. It's completely smooth. It's completely black, and it's hard to determine the shape because this light is so bright, and I'm having a hard time looking at it because it's so bright. And it's sleeting, and my heart's pounding, and I'm freaking out, and I'm seeing this thing, and I stand up, and I try to take my hood off so that I can hear something other than the sound of the sleet hitting my coat. And just as I do that, I feel this ultrasonic hum in my chest. Like, there's this, like, it went boom, and it made a scan or whatever. It did this thing, this pulse, and it found out that I was there. And like, I could feel this, like, you're standing next to a big bass speaker, but without the sound. And I'm getting like the hair on the ends of my arms standing up, and I'm just getting like this intense like dopamine rush that I just like a flood of dopamine in through my body. And then the lights turn off, and there's a light behind that's illuminated, and it gets kind of hard to remember what exactly happens, but I remember seeing a silhouetted form approaching me, and it's tall and skinny, and it's not too different from my own silhouette, and it's approaching me. He's walking towards me, and I'm hearing the sound. I say he, I don't know really what it was. It's just a silhouette. It's walking towards me, and I'm hearing the sound of the chips, the wood chips below me, creaking and cracking and breaking. And I notice that there's no more sleet. There's no more rain. There's no more anything. It's like I'm inside of this bubble. It's like I'm inside of this like silent cone. And he's walking towards me. And again, I say he, but I'm not really sure. And he's got this rod in his hand. It looks like a Harry Potter wand with the luminous light on the tip. And he's walking towards me with this thing. And the second he holds it out towards me, it's just like, boom, black, nothing. Like I'm frozen. And my heart's not beating. I can't feel my heart beat. I can't feel anything else, but I'm still like conscious. It's like he froze me in place, because honestly, I think I was dying. I think my aorta was tearing, and I was about to bleed to death, either from standing in the field too long of the craft, and I wasn't supposed to be there. Because the whole time I'm walking up to this thing, I'm getting the psychic impressions of, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. This is not protocol. Like, this is against protocol, but we have to do this. Like, this is like an emergency. Like this wasn't supposed to happen this way, but it has to happen. I'm getting like these psychic impressions like that this isn't how it's supposed to be. And I get walked, and I'm not sure if I walk or if I'm floated or I'm not really too sure, but now I'm on the backside of the craft. And, we talked about the synchronicities of your website and that shape. There's that shape. It looks like the beehive. There's an opening, but it opens itself. It like folds in, like the skin just folds away, and there's this shape. And then all of a sudden I'm inside, and I have like fleeting memories of actually being inside of the thing. And it honestly feels like it was a lot bigger, like it was the size of a house on the inside. Like it just felt bigger on the inside than it did looked on the outside. And I just remember curved hallways, doorways on the left, and, just like kind of like crooked ceilings, and like the doorway shapes were a lot like the shape of the doorway I walked into, but there's no light, but there's illumination. That's the way I have to describe it, because there's no light bulbs anywhere, but the walls themselves like glow, the floor glows, and at times I'm not sure if there's actually a wall there or not. Or I remember a table, but it wasn't like any other table I'd ever seen. It was made of metal and it was floating. And I remember being put onto the table. I do remember having a machine that looked like a little submarine or something, and it lit up and it put light into my body. It did something. It was like it was repairing me, or if it was scanning me or something, but it did something to me. I do remember, and this is kind of where things kind of get traumatizing, because I remember being flipped onto my stomach, and when I was on my stomach on the metal table, I could feel my face against the metal, and it kind of like folded away until my face was able to breathe. And then I'm hearing the sound of like they're doing something to the back of my head. And I don't know if they're drilling into my head, or if they're whatever they're doing to the back of my head. I'm freaking out. And they're telling me, don't worry, you won't feel it. Like this is okay. This is like for your own good or something, like this is just part of it. You'll be okay. And that still to this day kind of freaks me out to think about. I still don't like the sound of drills, like dentist drills still kind of like freak me the hell out. Huge trigger. And then after that, I don't really remember much of anything except for being in a room and I'm floating and I'm being told to look out. I'm being told to look intensely, and I'm looking at this wall and there's nothing really going on. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Contact, and maybe you have, with Jodie. Okay, so she's in her little bubble and the wall kind of starts to shimmer and she can see through it. That's kind of how it was. It was as if like the wall became transparent, and I'm now looking down at my planet. I'm looking down at Earth, only it's really close and we're going really fast, and I'm just seeing like this wash of colors, blues, colors, but I know it's my planet. Like I know that like that's Earth, and they're just like trying to install it into this in my mind, like you're all one, you're all living on the same rock, you need to try harder at taking care of it. Like we've given you this beautiful gift, you got to take care of your Earth, you got to take care of your planet. And we know it's not your responsibility individually, but like you need to see this, like you have to experience this, because and I'm crying and I'm wiping tears off my eyes because they're like in my face, they're like stuck to me, right? And I honestly think they took me up, and part of the surgery that I had on the spaceship was part of the recovery was microgravity. For some reason, microgravity was needed. And so they put me into microgravity, and then they showed me the Earth, and then they brought me back. I don't know why. I don't know why they would bring me back, but they did. The next thing I really remember is I'm standing there alone, and it's completely dark, and I'm in this field, and there's no light, there's no UFO, and I'm scared, and I start to run, And when I ran, I'm wearing Converses and it's slippery and wet, and I fell and I hurt my pinky, landed on my pinky real hard. And I get in the truck and I lock the door. So I run all the way back to the truck. I lock the door and I'm standing there, sitting there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring into the sky, expecting to see this thing come up out of the trees and leave, but it wasn't there. It wasn't there anymore. So I stayed there for about 15 minutes and I drove home. And when I got home, I was kind of expecting it, I left at 9 o'clock. I was kind of expecting it maybe being like 9:30 or something like that. My dad's already in bed, he's already asleep. I missed dinner, that's weird. And I get outside and I call up my girlfriend at the time and I said, I just saw some weird lights. That's all I told her. I said, I saw some weird lights in the sky. And instead of talking to me about the weird lights in the sky, she continues to berate me about like getting a job, you got to make sure you're getting a job so you can come down, stay down here more often, blah, blah, blah. And completely just like glosses over the fact that I just told her I saw some lights, had a strange experience. And so I forget about it. Like and this is the weirdest thing. It's like you can have an experience like that and then a half an hour later, not even think about it, like not even have it be that big of a deal. And it wasn't that big of a deal until the next day when I was working with my dad. We're doing yard maintenance. I'm cleaning up a yard and I'm shoveling leaves into a bag and I'm pushing down with my hand and I'm like, oh, my pinky hurts. Why does my pinky hurt? And right when I thought that, it's just like this, and I'm like, I was in this disassociative state. I'm like, I'm working, I'm listening to music. I'm in this like weird kind of like disassociated state of like, just like the zone. And then that's when all of those memories start flooding back into my brain. Like what happened the night before. And like, I just start crying. Like I just break down. I'm like laying on the ground, having a mental breakdown while my dad's like, what is going on? Are you okay? Like I'm just like 1 second I'm working and the next second I'm bawling my eyes out on the ground. And, I didn't realize that I had missing time until the next day where I went back down south to stay with my roommates and I was like, I had to tell someone about this shit because it's driving me nuts. I finally told my roommates because we had experiences together that summer. I figured they would be the safest ones. They stood right there with me and watched UFOs. And so I told them, and the first thing they said was, well, when did your girlfriend come? When did you call your girlfriend? That'll give you an idea when you got home. It's a timestamp. I looked and it was 12:57 when I called her. So I was gone for quite a while, a couple hours at least. But honestly, I think it was longer than a couple hours. Like, I feel like I could have been up there months. Like, I feel like I could have been in recovery for a long time and it just felt like 3 hours. Because, like, when I think about that, it just feels like it was a lot longer than 3 hours. It doesn't feel like 3 hours passed. It felt like a month and a half or something had passed. It felt like I had aged, and at the same time had become ageless. Like, I don't know, it's weird. But they brought me back and they sat me down. And I don't know why. I don't know why they took me in the first place. I have theories. I like to say that it was a medical emergency. Maybe there was something they had to do with my heart because I had problems with my aorta. Before that, I went into the doctors and they were scanning my aorta thinking, oh my gosh, this kid's ain't got long left. I went back in after that. It's perfectly fine. I'm going in for stress tests, EKGs, ultrasounds, CT scans. I went through the whole ringer. And it's just like all of a sudden everything's okay. How does that work? So I think they changed me. I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know for what purpose, but I wasn't supposed to die. So they picked my butt up and, sewed my aorta up and put me back, or I don't know what they did, but it's still like one of the biggest things to have ever happened to me. And it is one of the things that, like, it changed me permanently. I didn't come back the same Victor. I did, but at the same time, like, my brain, when I thought that I was having little psychic abilities before, like talking about being able to PK things before and intuitions and whatnot, it was about 1,000% higher after that. And it stayed that way for a long time, where just like the weirdest things would happen, or I would have premonitions about things, or I would have dreams and then they would happen, or, just being able to read my friends' minds and finish their sentences and know what they're thinking. And just little things like that. And I had an experience once where I rolled a cigarette off the table with my mind. And that was pretty interesting, because I didn't think at that point that it was, I was still struggling with the possibility of it being real. And then I literally was holding the cigarette, put it down, and then put out my hands and rolled it off the table, just instinctively, just trying to mess around with, my own mind. And so like little things like that started happening more and more. And I became really deeply, like, I would meditate every day. I went for a long time where like I was just deep into spirituality, deep into, I felt like I was becoming like this teacher or something, which is why, like, if you go on my blog, I called myself the Muad'Dib, which is Arabic for teacher. And I've always had a big connection to the Dune books and Frank Herbert's Dune books, because there's something about the desert planet for some reason really resonates really deeply with me. I've had many dreams as a child walking with someone through regolith fields, bouldered fields, and desert planet somewhere where I feel like wells are rarer than gemstones, and we would stay in caves and stuff. And I would have these like really deep lucid dreams about like meeting people and just things like that. So I became very much oriented to being this role. Like I became like I was accepting a job, and maybe that was the deal that I made as a kid, like, we could do this for you, but you got to do something for us. We're religion makers, and we need, for some reason we need you to spread the good word or something. I don't know, but that was just kind of like where I think the meat and bones is, like the why it happened. I'm not the first experiencer in my family. And I think this is kind of where like sovereignty and like my life kind of gets a little bit murky, because my mom was in a car accident when she was a teenager and completely crushed her pelvis and severed both fallopian tubes. She had a miscarriage and she was never able to conceive. She knew that when she met my dad, an angel told her, apparently she told me, an angel told her that she would have a son with him the first time that she met him. And of course it was at a bar, but she made it a mission that was going to be the case. And even though the doctors told her you'll never conceive, and they tried and they tried and they tried, and she tried before and it didn't happen, but she met my dad, and then 6 months later she's pregnant. It's just kind of a little weird. And the doctors weren't even sure how it happened. They're like, this isn't supposed to be possible. You don't have fallopian tubes. Like, how does this work? I think I know how it works. I think they had help. I think they had a little bit of help. It's like my birth was pre-programmed. My death was pre-programmed. Like, I feel like, is this really my life? Is this something that I was given? Like, is this? So I have a lot of problems there. My dad, when he was a teenager, he had an experience when he was out necking with his girlfriend in a car out in the woods. He saw a bright light in the woods light up brighter than anything he'd ever seen. And of course, he didn't tell me this story until after I had, come out and told him what happened to me. He's like, well, there was this one time, and they started taking off, and he's running from this thing in his car down the back roads of, the country roads, and it's chasing him. It's following him, he says. He said, the bright light kept up with me. I'm going 70 miles an hour down these back roads, and it's keeping up with me, and it's in the woods. Like, it's in the trees. How does it do that? He said. And he was riding with his girlfriend, and he said, my girlfriend kept saying, they want me to pull over. They want us to pull over. They want us to pull over. And my dad would always tell me, like, he told me this story 3 times. And the first 2 times he told me, and I didn't stop. I just kept going, right? And then one time we were a little inebriated. We've been drinking a little bit. And he finally opened up and said, now, Victor, I pulled over that car, and I don't know what happened. So I know I'm not like my mom had experiences with UFOs with her and her girlfriend driving down the highway, and one came down out of the sky and landed on the highway, and a bunch of people pulled over, and they got so scared that they turned around and went the opposite way because it was so close. But I know I'm not the only one in my family. I think it's generational. I think it has to do with something in our blood, something hidden in our blood, something in our genetics, something worth keeping, because I do believe that there's something to do with, breeding, generational studies. I do feel like I have been used for that purpose. So that's a little bit tough to talk about. But I do feel like that was part of the reason why I was picked up so often as a young man, because I've had multiple abduction experiences where I just find myself in the yard and not sure why, and I'm missing my boxers and I'm standing naked in the yard for some reason. And like late August of one year, I can remember being literally placed down into the ground from the sky, being placed very gently onto the grass, and I'm conscious and I'm looking around and I'm naked and there's dew everywhere on the grass and there's no footprints to where I was. So I figured like I was just placed here, and so I run in the house because it's like 4:30 in the morning and I'm standing naked in the yard. But I've woken up with my clothes on backwards and marks all over my body, and I've woken up as if I'm being shuttled through the wall and through my window and placed onto bed. I've had experiences where the ceilings opened up with a purple light, and then all of a sudden I feel like I'm being pulled out of my body and I black out and I'm somewhere else on the craft, not in my body, but I'm in someone else's body on the craft. I honestly believe like our bodies are just vessels, like these cellular membranes just make it easy to exist, here. So I feel like my body's just a vessel. My consciousness is non-local. Like I truly believe that like when we dream and when we die, we can go places. Like we leave our bodies and we go places. But yeah, I'm trying to think chronologically what I could continue with. But after 2011, after that big close encounter with where I was brought onto the craft, like I haven't really had much after that. It's really been pretty quiet. I've had a couple sightings where I've seen something. We were house sitting at my partner's parents' house, and we had a couple sightings where they flew over the top of the house there, and that was pretty cool. I actually got to get it on camera more often. And I can tell you right now, after 2011, when I didn't have my camera in my truck, I carried my Canon every day around my neck for the next 3 years straight. That's not an exaggeration. I wasn't going to miss it again. Are you kidding me? I had that one experience, and I had left my camera 90 miles south. That was never going to happen again, because you can tell people until you're blue in the face that this has happened, but until they have some kind of thing that they can hold in their hands and look at on a website, or if the internet tells them it's true, but if you're just telling them it's not the case. So I was really obsessed for the longest time about like proving it to people, and that's faded so much now to where I could care less if you believe me or not. Like it doesn't matter to me. It isn't a prerogative anymore. But for a long time, like I was like, I need to have my camera all the time, always. So I started to actually capture, these encounters when they would come do close flybys. I'd actually get them, and I'd send them to MUFON at first. I thought it was appropriate to share my story, and in 2011, the weird thing about the close encounters, I shared that with MUFON, and I had a state representative call me, Michigan state representative call me and talk to me. And then about a week after that, my sleepy little town in northern Michigan is inundated with black helicopters, black Chinooks, Black Hawk helicopter, like black unmarked helicopters, white vans with no plates, and unspecified military personnel, and they're going down to the same area I just saw the UFO, and they're taking soil samples, and and I'm driving to work as I'm seeing these people out there, and I know what they're out there for, like immediately I get like just like this drop in my gut. Like, I know what they're there for. Like, I know what they're doing. But how did they know? You know, did they pick it up on the MUFON database? Is there somebody watching the MUFON database and decided, oh, this might actually be a real event worth going out and investigating? And if that's the case, who was it? You know, was it Bob Bigelow's boys or was it some military operation? I don't know. I just saw a guy in a full freaking hazmat suit holding a box going away from the water that was right next to the UFO I saw, the giant 90-foot illuminated UFO that was 9 feet, 10 feet from the ground, whatever, close to the ground, locked in place, locked in a field. And so when that happened, when I started seeing spooks in my city, my little sleepy city, like I packed up a bag and I left. Like I got out of Dodge. It freaked me out. And that would happen when I would talk. And I'm a little bit concerned about talking with you now, because every time I talk about this stuff, weird things happen and people start poking around places they shouldn't poke around. And I believe I have, a right to privacy. And I think that there have been people out there that don't believe that experiencers have a right to privacy, that it's a case of national security for some people. And there are forces out there that want to know what we know. And there are people out there that want to know what we know. And, you could just ask. You could just ask, I tell you. Yeah, so I kind of attempted to come out of the experiencer closet before, and I joined Free back in 2015, 2016, which was the Edgar Mitchell, late Edgar Mitchell. Before he died, he met with Dean Radin and a couple other people, Ray Hernandez, and they started Free because Ray had an experience about the contact modalities all being the same thing. And I honestly believe that's the case too. And so I was very passionate about Edgar Mitchell's experience, transcendent experience in space, because I felt like I had experienced the same thing. I was shown Earth from orbit, and I had this transcendental Circuit 5 experience where the beauty of everything overcame me and I almost died from awe, So I felt like I had the same experience, and so I was really interested in what they were doing. My only problem with it is I felt like I was an experiencer that was surrounded by the broader UFO community, which was filled with hoaxes and lies and disinformation and lore, and people posting, lens flares telling me that they are talking to Andromedans. And I got really discouraged by it. Because I felt like I wasn't alone in this. I felt like 1% of the people who were taking this survey, this vast survey, was actually, supposed to be taking it. How are we going to get the truth of the matter if we're clouding it with all these yahoos? But here I am, I'm a yahoo. So who am I to judge? But at the same time, I was very much, I felt like I was casting pearls to swine. I felt like I really wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. And so I just shut myself up after that. I kind of just was like, you know what, just, you don't need to tell people, you don't need to talk to people, you don't need to know anymore. Just let it go. And I've tried to just let it go, but I still am on UFO Twitter, and I still engage in debates, and I still go to the spaces, and I still talk about contemporary UFOlogy quite often. But honestly, experiencers, we don't have to engage with the community. We shouldn't feel obligated to. We shouldn't feel obligated to regurgitate our trauma for entertainment. I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for anyone else anymore. I'm no longer mantled the role as teacher. I've given that up a long time ago. I feel whatever reluctant messiah they were shaping me into, I'm just not really about it anymore. And maybe that's why they don't come around as much. Maybe because I've given up taking upon that role of UFO messiah that they do with so many people. I don't know. So that's kind of where I'm at now in my life, and my contact is I've kind of just it's happened to me, and it's something that's happened throughout my entire life, and I think it'll happen until the day I die. When I was 23, I had a second near-death experience with a supraventricular tachycardia, where my heart was tricked into beating 247 beats per minute for an extended period of time. I knew immediately something was wrong, called my dad and had him take me to the emergency room, and they started like coming in and out of the room, and I started seeing their ethereal body before I would see their physical body. And I was starting to feel their intent. And I began to read my surgeon's or my doctor's mind. Like I could tell that he's really concerned that he wasn't going to get my heart rate down and they were going to have to crash cart me. Like I'm literally like hearing his thoughts. I'm going places, like, because my heart rate was almost 300 beats per minute. My field was so big, my aura, my whatever you want to call it, I just call it my field, was so big that I literally was like taking in everybody in that room's information and just like pouring through it. And they pumped me full of one drug, they pumped me full of two drugs, and he says, strike two. The guy says, strike two. Well, that didn't work. And I said, well, why'd you say that? Because I know what happens after strike three. You die. You're out. And he goes, no, you're not out. You're not out. We just switched to a different drug. Don't worry about it. Okay. And they pump me with that third drug and things start to work. My heart rate's starting to come down. All of a sudden it's coming down a little bit too much. They're freaking out. All of a sudden they roll in that crash cart. I know things are about to happen. I can feel myself dying. My heart rate goes down and down and down. And pretty soon it's 4 beats a minute. And I'm hearing the sound of it like getting slower and slower. And my aunt and my mother are with me, and she's not really my aunt, but I call her my aunt. She's my mom's best friend. She puts her hand on my forehead and starts to pray for me. Like, please, blah, 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 Jesus, please come help us out, And I'm looking at the ceiling, and there's an X, a cross section in the ceiling tiles. And I'm looking really closely at that, the division between the ceiling tiles, and they start getting wider. They start getting wider and brighter and brighter. And before you know it, the ceiling's like tearing open, right? And I'm just like floating out of my body. I'm looking down. I see my aunt. I see my mom crying, and I see my own body. And I'm floating. I'm getting closer towards this tear in the sky, right? This light that I've gone through before. I've experienced before. When I died the first time, I got pulled through this light and into the light. I was sitting underneath the light tree. So I'm assuming I'm going back again, right? And that's when all these arms start coming through the light, all these hands, all these multicolored different spectrums. And I'm realizing, like, there are people that are praying for me. There are people who are thinking about me. There are people who want me to stay in my body. Not only that, but there are the silhouettes of the figures I saw in the craft. And I don't know how I know they're the same, but I know that they're the same people. I know that they're the same beings. And they're standing there just on the other side of this tear, and they're watching me, and they're like, no, not yet. Don't go back yet. We got something you got to do. And they push me back in my body, that etheric form back into my body. And when I get back into my body, my heart rate immediately goes back up, and I take this breath, and I look at my mom, and I say, Mama, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm staying right here. Don't worry about me, Oh, thank God, But you thank yourselves, you guys did that, like somehow, some way, your ethereal arms came through a portal and pushed me back in my body, But that's what I mean about, like, I feel like my death is, connected to these beings. I feel like the afterlife, spirits, somehow they're all connected through wibbly wobbly space and time. And there's a theme there that connects everything. I just haven't quite figured it out yet. I feel it's just kind kind of crazy to think about how it all would work. Sometimes the UFOs would fly over the house at down south, and we kind of had a haunted house down south too. And then we would have poltergeist experiences where the UFOs, when we would have UFO sightings in 2011, when I asked show yourself to me in the presence of others, they would show up. And then the next day we would have, cereal flying out of the cabinets and the sinks turning on and knocking on our door with no one there. So, either the propulsion system affects space-time in a way that allows manifestations between different timelines or different realities, or it just makes it so that the ghoulies have a little bit more power or something. I'm not sure, but like the fact that you see a UFO and then have high strangeness in your house, like that's like, and that's a common thing. That's just not just me. That's not just something I've experienced, but it's something that I've read in the literature tons of times. And when I went to my first MUFON meeting, they convinced me, the girl on the phone when I first had my experience, she convinced me, well, you got to come to a conference, you got to come to one of our meetings. And I was the youngest person there. It was just like it just felt like free breakfast kind of, but they had ghost hunters there and they were talking about the ghosts. I wanted to talk about the connection between the two, so I kept asking questions about high strangeness and like the connections between UFOs and hauntings, and they really didn't have a whole lot. And so that was one of the last times I went to the MUFON meeting, which there wasn't really anything negative about it. It just I just felt I felt out of place. I sat at a table with some old lady who just wanted to talk to me about David Icke and reptilians, and I was really not really into any of that. I hadn't really any clue about what any of that meant. Dolores is going on about reptilians, and so me and my partner Hannah, that kind of became an inside joke. Anytime something weird happened, we'd just look at each other and go, Dolores, like the weird stuff is happening, it's Dolores. So I've always kind of felt like an outsider in the community. Like I always felt like I didn't really belong to any particular group. And then I kind of found the terminology, the right nomenclature. Like as an experiencer, it's not just UFOs, it's all sorts of weird stuff. And so like once I found a nomenclature for it, like I kind of felt like I felt better about my own self. I felt better about being able to define what happened to me a little bit easier. And I think honestly that's what's missing for a lot of people is vocabulary and nomenclature that they can use to help describe what happened to them, because once I found that, I found a lot better. And honestly, finding like the experiencer group has been a real blessing, because it can just be someplace I can go and talk about things and not have to worry about being perceived a certain way. Like I can just be who I am. I don't have to mask. Like it's another big thing is I'm pretty sure I'm a self-diagnosed autistic. Like I definitely have a lot of masks that I put on during the day, and it's exhausting. It's terribly exhausting. And it's kind of nice to be able to unmask as an experiencer and talk about that. So I think that's kind of why I'm doing it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much what I got. I'm not sure what else we could talk about, really. I'm trying to rack my brain.
Well, I just want to thank you for sharing all of that. Just absolutely extraordinary to hear your experiences. And I wonder if it's like this for you, but for me, there's always this, every time I hear an experiencer, there's so many overlaps and so many connections that are happening that I was just like getting chills, and getting really emotional listening to all of that.
Yeah, when
I have chills now.
When we're in, like oftentimes when we're in group and I hear someone say something that resonates, like we always talk about it resonating. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the perfect vocabulary for that, mm-hmm. because it really does. When I realize that like I'm not the only one who has experienced something, and it definitely helps me feel validated. It helps me feel, it really does help my soul to feel that way. Like it does mm-hmm. heal me in a sense. But yeah, I that's why I like hearing about other people's experiences, I think, is because not only is it validating, but it's another piece of the puzzle that I didn't have. Like there's something new that I can take from people's encounters and their stories and apply to my own experience and say, oh, well, that's an insight I didn't have before. There's always something new that I find out of this. Like my idea of what's happened has changed a lot. Like at first I thought that this was all something bad that had happened and that I had been, I was abducted, there's a lot of like negative nomenclature there associated from the 90s. And like it's transformed a lot over the years as I've matured and kind of like had an opportunity to like look back on my life. It's like, well, you're not dead though, like they didn't die, they didn't hurt you, you're still here. So maybe it was for a good, maybe, just try to look at it from a different perspective. And I think I've matured about my ideas about why. I don't think it's for any like sinister purpose or the takeover of the planet, or like this isn't an invasion. There are things that are happening outside of us, outside of our sphere of influence that we don't know about. There are migrations so big that we could hardly perceive them. We're still so small that we can't understand what the process is. We don't understand what the purpose is. And I think the purpose is survival. The purpose is life. The purpose is to spread and to consume and to learn and like that's the purpose, is to get off the rock, you dumb apes, come on. But yeah, I've definitely changed my views quite a bit over the years about what I think is happening and why.
Yeah, and one thing that is an area of just like endless fascination for me is the idea that when you were talking about sort of this deal that you made, this role that you were playing, this, this intergenerational experiencing, and is this my life? Like there's this narrative happening. How much do I have control over it? Like where does free will and sovereignty fit into it all? My life and my experiences I've come to this place where I'm just watching it like it's a narrative and going, wow, that's interesting. Like that's a twist, that I didn't see coming, but it's also fine. I'm not too disturbed by that because I don't feel displaced from my life in any way. But there are these external events that seem to be shaping and guiding things. And that takes this extraordinary ability to hold paradox and multiplicity at the same time. Like I'm here living my life in my body as well, for sure. And I want to believe that I'm making these decisions and that this is who I am and what I'm doing.
This is my free will. Yeah.
Right. But it gets really entangled in all this. So I wonder what you think about that. What do you think about sovereignty?
Yeah, I'm not really too sure. It's a good question. I feel like I've had nudges. Like I feel like I've been nudged to do certain things. Like I do feel like I've been definitely influenced by this, but I don't feel controlled. I don't feel captured by it. I understand that there was a purpose. I just don't know what that purpose was yet. Like I feel like I had agreed to it, but I'm not sure when or where. That's another kind of weird thing. Like, is it just this life that I agreed to it, or is it all the other ones that I've had too? And it, like, did this need to happen to teach me something about life? Like having the near-death experience and having a pectoral deformation that killed me. Like, was that needed? Like, did that need to happen to teach me something? And I really do think like there's teachers, like there's these little hidden teachers, and they teach us little lessons throughout our lives about certain things. And I do believe like kind of like guides, like spirit guides a little bit. I feel kind of like they exist in the same realm that the other on the craft, like whatever they are, definitely are kind of like related to that aspect of teaching and guiding and nudging to do certain things, but like it's hard because I don't know where I consciously agreed to it. So it's happening to Victor, you know, it's like, why would I agree to get picked up every 5 years for my entire life to have whatever kind of experiment or, you know, breeding program or, you know, hybridization program, whatever you want to call it? Like, why would there be why would I agree to all that? You know, like, what's the purpose to that? Or if I don't agree to it, do higher vibrations just naturally use lower vibrations to sustain themselves? Like, is this just a natural process that happens? Like predator and prey is a thing, and so this is also. It's really kind of murky. It's like what's really going on. I'm not entirely sure, but I never been like, okay, I want this all to quit right now. Like, I want this all to stop right now. Like, I've never really gotten to that point. It's always kept me on the precipice of that point, but I've always wanted to know why, you know, like, and I think that curiosity keeps me connected, keeps me engaged, keeps me focused on this, because I still don't have all the answers. I still don't know why. So I have some idea, but I don't, and I see common threads throughout other people's experiences that correlate with my own for like a why, but I'm still not sure, you know, and I still gotta know. I'm still compelled to know.
Yeah. I wonder, so this overlap between these beings and ghost experiences and poltergeist experiences and the dead, because that's my experience as well, is that there's some sort of common field or place that they all exist or come from, or that we visit, or that overlaps in some way.
Yeah.
And I wonder, when you were describing your near-death experience, and the one way that I really trust and tune in is through my emotional body. Like, when I hear something that triggers my emotions, I pay attention to that. It's a way to validate my experiences. When the emotional body kicks on, it's not intellectual in any way. It's just this overwhelming. And so hearing your near-death experience and these beings who you described as people that were waiting for you and knew you as different names and were kind of just there. First of all, I felt just this overwhelming gratitude for the fact that when we go to the other side, like, we're not alone, you know, that there's like somebody's waiting there and they really care about us and they really deeply know us. Like, I felt very emotional around that. And, but I was curious, is in that group, were they like, do you have a sense of them being human or a mix of human and others, or?
Yeah, I don't know what entirely, like, I feel like some of them may have been people that I had met in like a past life or in another life. And some of them I definitely feel were, I'm going to say this and it's going to sound weird, but I don't really have a definition, made on the outside. Like, I feel like some of us are made on the inside and some of us are conceived on the outside. And I feel like a part of me was conceived on the outside. And so I have this like connection to the outside, whatever the outside is. I don't know. I've had this experience before during a psychedelic experience where Salvia divinorum was really popular during the time, and the extract Salvinorum A was sprayed out in the plant material and sold at gas stations all over the United States. And you could basically freebase Salvinorum A and have the most profound psychedelic experience of your life and be back in 15 minutes. Nothing would ever happen. So I had a ritual experience where we set it up and we were going to use salvia for divination. That was the goal. And we had cast the circle. We had made a incense blend. My friend was a practicing magician, so I let him do everything he needed to do. And he handed me the water pipe and I hit it and laid down. And I remember high-fiving him, laying down and high-fiving him. And all these hands were going off. Every second was stretched seconds were stretched out from each other, and I could see the frames in between now, the space in between the nows. I was seeing all of this big wheel of arms and hands, and all of a sudden this wheel started taking me and spinning me faster. And there's an old painting where a man's moving up a column of angels, like all these like spirits moving around, and there's this multi-level layers. That's what it was like. I was moving through these layers of reality, and as I was ascending these layers of reality, those people were in different layers of these realities, and they were calling me by different names, and I knew all these different people. And at the very top, I pulled my head out of the water. I had stuck my head into a pool, apparently. That's where I had been this whole time. I had been sticking my head in this pool of water, and I pulled my head out of this water, and there was this divine being of light, and he's spinning this thing, and the thing he's spinning is the wheel that I was just attached to. He's the one animating reality, and I'm just berating him, whatever, with like, why did you make me with a crushed chest, and why did you do this to me? And he's just like laughing at me, it's like he thinks it's amusing that I'm like bickering him, and he just like pokes at me and shuts me up. And that's when I realized like there's just like you just shut up, like just calm down, take in where you're at right now. And I can remember I turned around and I saw a tall cannabis plant in my vision, and a snake crawled out of the foreground and climbs up this cannabis plant and coils up and strikes me in the forehead. And then this is all happening in a hallucination. I'm holding a cup of water, getting ready to drink a cup of water. And I think that's where like me pulling my face from the water comes from at the same time. But I look down into my cup of water, and the snake falls down into this cup of water, but it turns into like a green ribbon. And I'm seeing the earth and the moon, and I'm seeing like inside of this cup, I'm watching like the wax and wane of like human progress, all fractaling out in a matter of seconds. I'm seeing this like the moon spin around the earth and things happening, and I'm like watching like a little tiny mini history inside of a teacup, right? And this green ribbon comes in and it stamps out the earth, comes in and goes doof, stamps out the earth. I drop the cup. But the one thing that like stuck with me is like as I was ascending, I was seeing all of the same people from my near-death experience. I was seeing all of these like multiple different realities, different levels, different layers, different membranes of reality. And as I was transcending through these, I was being called out to like, oh, there he is, there he goes, oh yeah, Victor, or oh, so-and-so. I don't really remember who they were. They all called me different names, but I don't remember what the names were. And as I was coming back to my body, like as I was coming down, I was descending these layers, and they were closing up behind me. And there were these people, these little beings that were repairing the tears that I had just made. They were like, like coming in and stitching things up. And I've drawn this a couple of times where these little beings that are repairing the holes that I stepped through, and as I get down into the ritual room, I'm seeing all these like grubby little spirits walking around, filing away scrolls and pouring potions, and and I realized that like some of these beings have ropes tied to them, and they go up to these other levels, and some of them are tied up and they go all the way up to the very top where they're like, there's this guy spinning the world, and these little tiny grubby spirits on the bottom are the ones that my friend is employing to work for us. They're his employees. They're his, and he's commanding all these grubby little spirits to keep his stuff in order. And I kind of come back to my body, and I realize like I've been there before. I'm now back here. I'm back in this body. I'm back in this box. I'm inside again. And I've always. It's hard to say, like the yearning to go back outside, yearning to return from wherever I came from. It's always been there since the time I was little. Like I've always felt like I was not quite human, not quite, all there. also somewhere else too. Like sometimes I often think about having multiple bodies. And because I think the reason why is because on the craft one time I saw myself behind glass, and I'm not sure if it was me and I was taken out of my body and shown my body, or if it was another body and there's just another one waiting for me in cold storage for me to hop into. Or it all sounds pretty crazy to talk about, but like bilocality, the idea of I've always felt like I'm not the only victor, as weird as it sounds. And I do believe, like, in a sense, like, we're kind of all one, but at the same time, there's a part of me, there's a me flies the craft. There's a me that's flying the craft, and I've felt it, I've dreamt it, I've experienced it. I know what it's like to be augmented through your mind, to not be the only one in your mind, you know, to have this megalithic structured object connected to directly to your mind. It's foreign, it's immense, like it's just too big to comprehend. And I honestly feel like I'm like a little speck of dust inside of it, like a grain of sand inside of an oyster or something. When I'm on the craft and I'm flying it and I'm screaming across the sky and just belting through the atmosphere. And I've had these dreams since the time I was little. And I also have a lot of reoccurring dreams about waiting at an airport for a very special arrival. I get these reoccurring dreams about waiting at a single airport terminal for a very special plane. And we all know that we're waiting for a very special ride. And we all know that there's this arrival coming, and we're all sitting in this terminal together. And I know I'm not the only one there, but we're all waiting for the ride to show up, the big boat in the sky to show up. And I've had that dream since I was, 12, reoccurring throughout my life, but not sure what the reoccurring dreams are about. But I'm very much a lucid dreamer. When I was younger, I definitely would have chronic nightmares, and I would lucid dream my way out of them. I've seen the people before in my dreams, and one time, the one dream that's kind of lucid dream that kind of like sticks out all over all the other ones is I'm walking down the middle of the street, and all of a sudden I start to feel like gravity's not the same, and I'm jumping, and pretty soon I'm like leaping, and all of a sudden I'm flying, and I'm floating above the street, and I'm looking down, and there are all these trees lining the street, and all of a sudden the leaves turn from green to autumn leaves to fire back to green leaves, and I'm making them change. I'm doing this change, like in my mind, I'm rendering this. And at the end of the street, there's this big open-faced pavilion, and there are all these people down there, and they all got like 13th century Greek clothes on. They got like shawls and wrappings, and they're all waiting for me to come down, and they're all like, "Oh, hey, well, come on in, come on down." And I'm coming down, I'm like floating down like some kind of like Messiah figure. I'm just floating down to them, and they're like, they embrace me, and I wake up. And I've had that dream a couple of times now. It's the same lucid dream where I'm flying, and I'm coming down to a pavilion, and there are a group of people there that have been waiting for me to show up, and I'm finally here. And I don't know what that one's about, but they're the same people. Like, they're there in my dream, in my lucid dream. They're standing there. They're the arms that pushed me back into my body. They're they were there when I died. They're there when I dream. I think they're probably the same ones that are aboard the craft. I don't believe that the people that picked me up were aliens. I believe that they walked on Earth and they breathed our air, and so their bodies are probably a lot similar to ours. I do remember the helpers. I do remember their faces. Like, I feel like they've tried to wall up some of my memories, but I still remember your face. I still remember the big eyes. I would call them, I use the terminology bug apes, because they look like bugs and apes combined. They just looked like logic apes. They were just, and I don't know if the craft makes them from us or if they're designed for a purpose, biologically designed for a purpose, and they're just little helpers, and they are like the grubby little spirits that take care of the room. They're the little grubby little guys that take care of the craft and make sure everything's good to go. But the alien is the craft. The alien's not the ones using it. They're not the aliens. The alien is the craft, and the craft has its own intelligence, and it is a spiraling mass of bodies and flesh and consciousness. It's this undulating form of minds, and I've been brought before it, and I've been peered through, and it's like when you talk about sovereignty, I think that's the only time where I really feel like it's a problem, because this thing is so immense. This thing is so big and powerful, and it can make people, and it can put you in bodies, and it can do all these things. And I'm just a little speck of sand in the oyster. I'm just this little tiny thing. But yeah, the craft is the alien. Like, I don't know if it came from somewhere else, but I know while aboard it, I've seen the planet, the one that's not ours, the one that either it came from or the one that it's been to, or a place that exists. It's this big planet. And I know it has 2 moons, and I know that there's a lot of people there. And I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it just is, but one of the things I've seen is where it came from, and I don't know if it exists anymore or if something bad happened and that's why it left. I have a lot of memories about our solar system being inhabited by a lot of different things. Like, I feel like there was a great scattering, like something happened to our solar system. There used to be planets full of life. There used to be tons of just things going on, and then something terrible happened. I have a really deep connection with the planet Mars, with, dreams about life. And I think that's the desert planet that I walked on. And I feel like sad to have gone back as it's like that. Like, I feel like seeing it like that it breaks my heart. I feel like we left. I feel like we took off and we went other places. And I don't know. I think humanity, humans, they scattered. And I think you adapt to new planets, you adapt to new stars, you adapt to new environments, you become aliens. Like, I think that that's really what it is migrations, on these scales that I can't even comprehend. I keep getting the themes in my experience about there are just things that are happening that are too big for you to know about. And that's the thing that drives contact. Like, the reason why you're seeing UFOs is because there's something happening, and we've got to keep moving. We've got to keep either going to the center of our universe where there's more life, or there's this idea that the structure of the universe, the structure of this existence, there are places that are safer than others, and it's constantly moving and churning itself in and out. The same force that's pulling is the same force that's pushing. It's this idea that, like, there's a singularity, and the singularity is expanding all time out, and at the same time it's sucking all time in, and there's these like parallel universes existing at the same time, and either they're from this parallel universe or they're from a section of our universe that is in peril, and they have to migrate, on a scale that is just so big that we couldn't even fathom it. But there's this thing happening. And I don't know what it is, but there's this thing happening, and that's what drives things to move around and people to move around. That was always a big part of the download, the knowing, whatever you want to call it. This information that I feel like I got placed in my lap. I just call it the knowing. There's a lot that I just feel like I know without knowing how. There's a lot that I just feel like I feel deeply connected to. And it's definitely the idea that, like, we're a lot older, as like we're a lot older than we think we are. We're very special. There's something in our blood worth keeping. There's some kind of like galactic biodiversity program going on that we got to be a part of, because there's something so freaking special about humans, and they're so cool and they're so cute, and we should just keep them around. I don't know. I do have just a huge fascination with like observing human nature and just how people act and how I act, and like just analyzing it all. And I'm a very much a hyper observant individual. Like I'm constantly just like taking in information, and that might be a little bit of the autism, but it's a thing that I can't turn off. So I do think that there's a definite link between neurodivergency and contact experience too. That's one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about, because I've been reading a lot about Gary Nolan's experiments with Kit Green and hyperconnectivity in the Caudate-Putman areas of the brain, and that's pretty much like that's people with on the spectrum. That's people with ADHD, that's people with autism. We've got hyperconnectivity in a lot of areas of our brain, and I think that's on purpose. Like I think there's a lot more of us. I think we're proof that whatever program is going on is successful. Like whatever thing that's happening, all of these people that wake up, and I say wake up, but like all these people that like come to terms with their mind and their capabilities and their consciousness and the powers that has, like a lot of these people that are waking up, like I think that's the goal. Like that's the proof that it's successful. Like whatever this program was, whatever this contact was, like the fact that there are a lot of us around now, like that's just proof that it worked. That's just kind of what I think.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. There's so many things that you talked about that it's really interesting, because you'll say something and then I'll have a question about it and then you'll just answer it. And so I have all these questions. No, it's so good. It's like, it's great. It's fantastic. I'm curious about, like, when you said how much you love humans and how special humans are, I've had also just this lifelong like homesickness, this deep, painful, overwhelming homesickness for something that I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what I'm homesick for, but this incredible homesickness. But in the last 2 years, it's as if I've suddenly seen the earth and the human species. I mean, the earth, I was always very connected to nature, but I've seen it in a way that it's become so incredibly precious to me. Like I love humanity as a species. I love us. I think there's something so endearing, just our earnest striving, and it's all messy and complicated and we don't do great all the time, but there's something in us that's so beautiful. And I have, like many experiencers, I've had lifelong dreams and experiences of being shown the planet going through something cataclysmic. And yes. I wonder, you talked about being on the craft and being shown the earth in this way that gave you this different perspective. But I wonder if you'd had experiences like that. The reason why I'm so observant and I feel like I'm paying attention to all of it is because I've been waiting for that. I felt like I was sent here to witness an end of an age, an end of an era, and I was told that it was going to happen. And so if you look back from 2011, I've got poetry about how much it sucks to sit with this aching feeling that it's going to happen. Like I'm going to see an apocalypse. I'm going to see a revelation, a revealing. I'm going to see powerful men fall and systems collapse, and there will be a quiet that you can't stand. And so I was left with the same, imparted with the same warning, the same take care of your planet because you need to try harder. It was the hugest message that was imparted with me. It was 2 simple words: try harder. And that's a message for humanity. You all need to try harder. You need to take care of your planet. And so probably hundreds of other experiencers while I was on the craft, the one thing they made sure to tell me was your planet is an incredibly diverse biological organism. Things happen here that don't happen anywhere else in the universe.
It's magic. It's special. The probabilistic odds for you to even exist are so just immense that it's just insane. It's just crazy that you even exist at all, and you're shitting on your plate. You know, you're crapping where you sleep. You know, like you're ruining it, and you need to try harder. And it left me with a lot of like individualistic, like guilt about the way I lived. And so I became vegan for the longest time. I stopped consuming meat. I stopped consuming plastic products. I gave up all of my worldly possessions and lived like a vagabond. You know, I subjected myself to poverty so that I would live within my means. I completely changed my life. It completely changed the way that I talk about the planet and the way I look at the planet and the way I look about humanity. And yeah, that definitely was a big part of the experience on the craft. And I don't think that was the only time that I had that experience. I think it was a conditioning throughout my life. And maybe that's the purpose too, is just to get us to freaking try harder and to behave ourselves and to do the mission, which is to get out there and see the things that he put out there for us, you know, whatever the animator of whatever this world, the guy that spins the wheel, you know. So yeah, the apocalypse dreams, yes, the visions of fires, and I'm the fast moving tides, and I'm the flames, the fires. I used to have dreams about the forest fires before they happened, and the one that I'm still waiting for is a wind that has no equal. That's one of the things I was told that I would see, was there would be a wind that has no equal. And this is the thing that, like, I'm a poet, and I think they know that. And so a lot of times these downloads, these knowings, they come to me in poetic fever, where I'll just be sitting there and all of a sudden I'll just be like, I gotta write, like, oh my God, I gotta write this down, you know, and I get caught up in what I call the poetic fever. And whether that's automatic writing or channeling or whatever you want to call it, it happens. And I've been waiting for it to happen for 11 years now, and it still ain't happened. So I don't know if it ever will happen, or if it's a happening that is 11 years long, or I'm not sure what it is, but yes. Yeah.
Are you hopeful? Are you generally hopeful about our planet?
Yes, I'm generally hopeful. I believe that, I think that we're seeing it happen now. We're seeing powerful governments shaken to their core, power structures changing, superpowers dissolving, populations dwindling, biodiversity dwindling. Soon it's gonna be quiet, and we ain't gonna be able to stand it. We're gonna be so used to the hustle and bustle of the world turning that when it stops, it's gonna drive us all nuts. You know, it's gonna be quiet, it's gonna be dark, and it's gonna be something we're not used to. I see it happening now. And I honestly believe, like, yeah, this planet's ruled by billionaires. It's ruled by people that shouldn't be in charge. And there's going to be a revelation, but I don't think it's going to be by Earth's God. I think there's going to be a revealing of something, and it's going to change the way the world works and the world operates. And we just honestly, we have to look to the elders. We got to look back to the way things were, and we have to return to a more egalitarian way of life. We have to become more community oriented, and I definitely do see that. The kids are all right. Like the kids, Gen Z, man, they are all right. They're amazing. They're gonna fix a lot of problems. Like, you know, they're smart. They're more educated. They're more connected, and that's something I'm hopeful about. Is like the younger generation, just like, we're going to keep on keeping on. We're pretty resilient. Even if we are mold on this artisan loaf of bread, you know, mold's still pretty hard to get rid of. I do have hope for the future. I do see a golden path for humanity, and I would love very much to set us on that path and keep us on that path, but I don't think it's my job. I think my job is just to see it happen. This is something I've talked to my partner a lot about. She's a very powerful psychic in her own right. We read each other's minds a lot, but she often says that she feels like she was put here to see the quote unquote the end of the world. Like, you know, she was here to see this ending of this age. And I kind of feel like I'm in the same boat. I feel like I was put here to see something happen and to be around when it happens and to teach people and to help people and to, to be there at whatever job or role that I'm supposed to play. But I do feel like that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that really resonates with me, and that really feels, and that I've heard from a lot of other experiencers, that sense of like, this really internal, intense, like mission driven, I'm here to do something, I have to do it, a lot of personal responsibility and guilt. And then at some point, this idea of like, I just am here, I'm here to do something, but I'm here to witness it as well. I'm just here to witness whatever's happening, this unveiling, the apocalypse. And yeah, it completely reorders your life. I live in this little dome with solar power and a composting toilet, and like this is like, where else was there to go? It just, and it feels like I'm supposed to do permaculture and supposed to start, even if it's not for this lifetime, but for lives beyond this lifetime, for someone to find these blueprints at some point. I go back and forth. I'm like, sometimes I'm just astonished at what humans do and how we respond, and I'm really hopeful about it. But there's a massive part of me that can't get away from the lifelong knowing that something's coming, and that it's that giant paradox. Like, there's nothing that I can do about any of it, but there's a lot that I can do personally. Right. And
that's the thing. The tiny things that we can all do actually matter. And so like me thinking that like, oh, well, I can't change the hearts and minds of millions. Well, you can change the hearts and minds of 12 people, and then those 12 people hearts and minds of 15 people. And I often think about like how many people's lives I've changed just by existing and having these experiences and sharing them with people. My friend Aaron became, a licensed Reiki healer and has gone down, a path all their own. And same for like all of my friends that like were close with me during that time. Like they became, kinder, gentler, quieter, just more in tune with the earth and, more hippy dippy, but at the same time in a good way. There's a lot of good stuff that comes out of that way of thinking, so even though I don't think I've done my job, like I think I've done it. Like I think that's why I'm so chill about it anymore, is because it's like, oh well, you did what you did what you were supposed to do. Like I feel like I'm completing my mission just by existing, and that's something that it is good to kindly come to terms with and just not worry about so much anymore, and not let it consume my everyday life.
Yeah, right. Having that sense that like, how's your life going? Are you sleeping? Are you having nice relationships? Like, is it okay to just have a life in the midst of all of this, which is a big, important thing. And I know the last thing that I want to ask you about, and it's I think for me, it would be a very vulnerable and tender question. So feel free to be like, nope. But, you've lived like right on this, you've lived close to death. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to share about the experience of living so close to death.
It makes you live hard. I know that much. It makes you want to experience it. Like the alternative isn't as good as this. Like I know for a fact that when I die, I'm going to want to do it again because it's so much fun. Like it's so good. It's just so, even the hurt is good. Like even the pain is good. So I definitely, like for a while there, I did have fear of death. I developed an agoraphobia where I figured if I was going to go anywhere alone, I was going to have a heart attack and then fall over dead, So there was a lot of like stepping stones to get over that fear, and that fear's still there. Like it's not, I didn't get over it, but it doesn't handicap my life anymore. I think going through like past life regressions and honestly truly believing in like some kind of reincarnation or some kind of like, that definitely has helped my perspective. I don't think that like when I die, Victor might die, but the me that is listening to Victor speak doesn't die, that me decides to do something else. I don't know what that something else is, but I know that there's a something else. I've experienced a something else. Part of it was sitting under a beautiful tree talking with people I love, so it can't be that bad. So yeah, there's a lot of there was a lot of fear to get over, of being told, hey, your heart's been crushed most of its development. You probably won't live to see 30. I'm 35. Shows what they know. I think I had a little help along the way, granted. I had a few things that, other people haven't had in their lives, a little bit of help. And that's another thing, why? Why help me? But I do believe I definitely had a little bit of help along the way. So it's been a constant part of my life. I was also born close to death too, because I had the cord wrapped around my neck long enough to where I was purple when I came out, and they weren't sure if I was going to breathe. But they finally got me breathing. So I kind of feel like I've always kind of been on this ledge, this precipice of death. And I think part of the thing that I'm supposed to teach people is how to die and how to accept death. And it's kind of what the Muad'Dib does. He's a teacher for grief and for that transitional period. And I feel like I've experienced it to where I can, if I share that with other people, it'll make their death easier. It'll make their transition easier. I've been around others who were dying, and I had a girlfriend's grandmother who was dying, and I helped her transition, and that was pretty heavy. Just letting her accept her life and to process her regrets and to absolve her of those regrets, and to tell her that, if you want to do it again, you can. There big white light in the sky, the big white recycling light in the sky is what I called it. And, if you want, you can do it again. And if you have regrets, you can have another chance. It just might not be the same, but she was having experiences where she was seeing her late husband in the room with her. And so I treated it as if it was real. Other people kept telling her it's not real. And I kept telling her to shut up, get out of the room, leave her alone. If she wants to have her husband come see her before she dies, let her, So I started treating it as if it was real, and it was real, very much real. It was real to her. That's all that mattered. So yeah, I definitely feel like death is a part of my life, and I have friends who have lost close ones. Lost his brother, and recently we were talking about that kind of grief and how he didn't lose his brother. His brother's still there with him. He just doesn't exist in his body anymore. He doesn't exist as a physical thing. He exists within your genetic makeup. He exists within your memories. He exists within you. You're obviously still carrying him around. You talk to him every day. So where is he? He's right there with you. Don't worry so much about that. Him being lost, him being gone. Those are vocabulary words that you can't be using. Those don't exist. You're obviously still, carrying them around, and they're still with you. And I occasionally get visited by the dead. I have family members that I've never met. Maternal grandfather came to me once during a fever and stood at the foot of my bed and helped to heal me. I saw him physically standing right there with me. And even though I had never met him, I knew who he was. So I don't think time exists like we think it does. I don't think it's linear. I think time exists trinocularly in three, past, present, and future. And these trinocular visions, they blend in with each other and influence each other at the same time. So the dead aren't really ever gone. We just are somewhere else. We're just in another parallel time or a pocket dimension or whatever you want to call it. But there's that essence. There's a part of us that can't be destroyed. There's a part of us that energy doesn't just get, scattered across the universe. There's a part of us that still sticks around, and for different purposes, whether it's to like see your loved ones or just to hang out for a while and fly around the planet, whatever it is. And I don't think that it's like something that it's kind of hard to explain. Like, I think at the same time that you exist everywhere, you don't exist nowhere. Like, I feel like when you die, you both can be who you were, I guess. I could still come back. I could come back to, if I died, I could come back to my friends and family as Victor, but I also as this all. Like, I'm also at the same time that I'm using the all to incorporate together into this like ghost of Victor. So like I think like we do dissolve into the universe, but at the same time we can recombine ourselves, and we can come to people that need us, and we can travel through portals, and we can move through these holes that we make in space-time. And I'm not afraid of death anymore, because I know something lives on and something happens. And even if it doesn't, like, even if I'm wrong and there's nothing, I guess that's okay too. So yeah, it's been something that's been a part of my life, and something I've thought about for a long time, mainly because of my interactions with spirits throughout my life, like being able to hear the dead and doing ghost investigations and feeling their presence and feeling their physical manifestations. Like, I know that death is a lot more complicated than we really have any grasp on. And it's something that lives next to us. It's something that lives with us. I had an experience once with what I would consider like an angel of death. I was sitting at the post office and had the window down waiting for someone to come in that I was giving a ride to. We just got done taking pictures, and I got the sense that there was this tall, dark, Grim Reaper-esque figure standing right next to me, and he's connected to me. He's with me, and I just get this shudder, and I, physically shudder. And my friend goes, "What?" I said, "I feel like I just got the angel of death touching my arm or something, like I just feel like I just saw the angel of death." And I'm like, "Oh, that's fucking weird. That's a weird thing to say." I drive over, showing the pictures to my dad at his friend's house, and we're on the back deck, and we hear the screaming pump of air brakes from a semi. And a semi had run the red light, and it hit a person. And I was the first one there at his window. I was the first one to be there. And he was in the passenger seat, and he was bleeding from his ears, and he was pale, and he was dying. And I knew he was dying. I could tell he was dying. I felt his soul leaving his body. And I looked into the back seat, and I saw his daughter, and she was in the car seat. And I talked to him as if he was still here. I said, "You've been in a car accident, the ambulance is on the way, but I need you to do something for me. Stay in your body, stay here, stay with your daughter, stay here, please, anchor yourself to this moment." I kept saying, "Anchor yourself to my voice, come back." And he did. He stayed in his body. He didn't wake up, but I knew he was still with us. Jaws of life came. I got the little girl out of the back of the car. First responders got there, and I just started taking pictures. The accident, the scene, what had happened, and actually won the case for him because of that, and they got a settlement out of it. But I saw him a couple weeks later. I mean, at that point, it had been quite a while later, and they were at Walmart, and he had a whole halo on, neck brace, screws in. And I went up to him, and I'm just like crying at this point, like, because I know I'm not gonna be able to like contain myself for this. I said, "I know you don't know who I am." I said, "But I was the first person there when you had your accident." And he goes, "It was weird. I was on my way out, and I heard your voice, and I decided to stick around." And he's, just thank you. And so, yeah, like, there's something to it. I've got this weird connection to death, and I got this weird connection to this other side, and to the outside. That's what it is. It's the outside. It's outside of the life. There's an inside and an outside, I guess. And I've got this connection to the outside for some reason. Like I was conceived there and put into this body for some reason. I don't know.
It's absolutely extraordinary. Thank you for sharing all of that. I'm so moved. It's full of tremendous just wisdom and richness, and that thing that connects us all. That transmission came through when you were talking about that. Thank you so much. And so, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Just try harder, guys, I guess. That's the message that I was left with. So I guess that's the message that I try to leave other people is just try a little bit harder, be a little bit quieter, be quiet in order to listen, be nice to each other. That's pretty much what I've been trying to do, and it's been working for me. So I think it could work for a lot of other people. We're all really so wrapped up with everything that we can't, it's hard for us to just stop and listen. And whether that be to your higher power, to yourself, to your spirits or guides or whatever they may be, like that outside, let it in, like let some of that outside in and share it with people, like I've been keeping this inside of me for so long that now that it's finally out, it's like putting down a weighted vest, or, I'm done pushing that rock around, I just feel, it helped. So
I'm so glad. Yeah, a true honor to just witness your story. Incredible. Thank you so much. For more information or to book a one-on-one session with me, visit honeyheart.org.